that 4 sitting members of Congress should, quote, go back to their own country when he has authorized raids without warrants on thousands of families across this country. I am not surprised that he uses the rhetoric that he does when he violates international human rights and takes thousands of children away from their families. I am not surprised that he has turned our public education system under the leadership of Betsy DeVos into a cash cow to enrich himself and his friends. Are you also aware that when a formerly incarcerated person is homeless, there's a 60% chance that they will be rearrested? But if that same person has access to housing, the percentage drops to 29%.
Housing is one of the factors.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. You just watched that clip of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing what she does best, performing. Honestly, it feels less like a serious hearing and more like a high school drama audition. Today, we're breaking down a classic showdown the mainstream media would rather you forget. You've got the self-proclaimed leader of the squad trying to play a gotcha game with one of the most brilliant minds in the country, Dr. Ben Carson. And I've got to say, watching AOC and her allies try to outlogic a world-renowned neurosurgeon is like watching a toddler challenge a grandmaster to a game of chess. The squad's entire brand runs on outrage, victimhood, and labeling anyone who disagrees with them as a racist to shut down debate. But Ben Carson doesn't take the bait. He stays calm. He stays precise. And he has this incredible ability to let AOC trip over her own radical talking points without ever raising his voice. We're going to walk through the hearing where she tries to pin HUD policies on him, and trust me, this is a masterclass in composure and intellect. Buckle up, because this is what it actually looks like when the radical left gets dismantled.
Where you stated, quote, the war on poverty sometimes conflicted with the war on drugs, which often dealt harshly with nonviolent offenders, taking men away from their families and disproportionately affecting minority communities. Are these your words?
Yes.
Do you acknowledge that the war on drugs disproportionately impacted Black communities and communities of color, despite marijuana and other drug use levels being comparable to white communities?
Traditionally, that has been the case.
And I see here, are you also aware that when a formerly incarcerated person is homeless, there's a 60% chance that they will be rearrested? But if that same person has access to housing, the percentage drops to 29%.
Housing is one of the factors that is beneficial in preventing recidivism.
I'm concerned here that the war on drugs has not been solely limited to incarceration, and that the negative impact of the war on drugs has not been limited to incarceration. But also we had legislated rippling effects that also seems to have been codified in our housing system. Are you aware of HUD's one strike rule, which evicts tenants for a single incidence of criminal activity, no matter how minor, with no holistic review?
There is the ability of local jurisdictions to alter that rule.
Mm-hmm. But federally, this provision still persists, correct?
As far as I know, it's still intact.
Mm-hmm. And so a person could be stop and frisked and be found in possession of a small amount of marijuana and then be evicted or have their entire family evicted from public housing.
That is a possibility.
Are you aware that owners and public housing authorities can subject tenants to tests for alcohol and drugs?
They can require that, yes.
Mm-hmm. And I see here that we also have no-fault policies where an entire family can be evicted for the criminal activity of a guest of the household, even without the knowledge of anyone in that household. Are you aware of that provision as well?
The use of such activity is extremely limited, if ever used.
Mm-hmm. But they are still codified in federal law, correct?
Is it on the federal books? As far as I know, it's been on the books for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Do you support reversing some of these provisions?
Which provisions?
Say the no-fault policy.
I can talk about that on individual cases if you have an example that you want to talk about.
Well, I'd say, would you support being able to move some of these policies over to a more holistic review. You yourself asked for case-by-case consideration. Should that case-by-case consideration be codified in federal law instead of having blanket one strike or no fault policies?
I'm always in favor of more flexibility.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, Secretary Carson. I'd also like to highlight there's been much talk about the issue with NYCHA and public housing, and it's horrifying, the conditions that are happening in NYCHA. It's horrifying that people are living through winter without heat, opening their ovens to try to make sure that they're able to sleep through the night. But I think it's important to notice that this is not about throwing more money to the problem. This is about throwing the money at the problem. NYCHA and public housing across the country has been starved by members of Congress for over 15 years. And that deficit has built up for many, many years, which has led to, in New York City alone, a $32 billion price tag to make sure that we get people basic heat, hot water, and so on. And I don't think that, no matter what policy changes we make, you can't take food away from a child and then not understand why they can't or don't eat. And I think that that's exactly what's happening with our public housing program. Chairwoman, I would like to seek unanimous consent to submit to the record a New York Times article on what it would take to fix New York's public housing.
Without objection, such is the order.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to make of note that the provisions that we wanted to reverse, including one strike and no fault policies, are being introduced in our bill on the Fair Chance at Housing Act.
All right, part 2. This is where the real breakdown begins. Man, tell me I'm not the only one who noticed how absolutely deafening the contrast is here. Let's start with that hearing. You've got AOC sitting there with her neatly stacked binders, trying to lecture Dr. Ben Carson on public housing and the so-called one-strike rule. She's doing everything she can to frame these long-standing policies as some kind of targeted attack on minority communities. But look at Carson. Completely unfazed. Why? Because he actually knows the history. He knows these policies weren't dreamed up by the Trump administration. Most of them have been on the books for decades, many of them passed and signed into law by Democrats, the very party AOC claims to represent. And here's the part they never want to talk about. AOC and the squad love to use the word compassion, but their version of compassion keeps people stuck in permanent government dependency. They want to make it harder to remove criminals from public housing. Let that sink in for a moment. Ben Carson is focused on protecting the families who live there, the law-abiding, hard-working people who don't want their kids growing up next to drug dens and violent crime. AOC wants to protect the repeat offenders. Carson wants to protect the innocent. That's the difference between a performative radical and an actual leader. Now let's move to that rally clip, because this is where Ben Carson really makes his point, quietly but devastatingly. He calls out the real racism, and is absolutely right. The most racist thing you can do is tell a black American or anyone that they have to think a certain way, vote a certain way, or hold a specific set of political beliefs because of their skin color. That's why the squad despises Ben Carson. His living proof that their narrative doesn't hold up. If a man can rise to become a world-class neurosurgeon and a cabinet secretary while holding conservative values, the entire systemic oppression controls everything argument starts to crumble. They're not afraid of his policies, they're afraid of his example. And then comes the final nail in the coffin: results. HBCU funding. Opportunity zones. The First Step Act. Real, measurable outcomes. Meanwhile, AOC offers tweets, performative outrage, and staged photo ops at the border. Carson and the Trump administration delivered the lowest black unemployment rate in American history. Honestly, it's embarrassing. The squad shows up to these hearings hunting for a viral slay queen moment, and instead they slam headfirst into a wall of facts and common sense. Ben Carson doesn't yell. He doesn't posture. He just tells the truth. And as we saw today, the truth is absolute kryptonite to people like AOC. So what do you think? Are we finally watching the squad lose their grip on the narrative? Let me know down in the comments. If you found value in this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We've got to keep spreading the truth because we all know the mainstream media won't.